Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Life Stories. My name is Trent and I hope you guys are all doing awesome as always. Today we have some stories coming at you from Reddit/entitledparents. So without further ado, let's get it started. Our first story of the day is titled, Homestay expects me to look after children and give them whatever of mine they want. This happened back when I was in language school in Japan in high school. I was returning for a second year. The first year, I had an absolutely amazing homestay. They were great, and so, that year, I signed up again. I was assigned to a decent-sized family, a salaryman father in his late 30s, a housewife mother in her early 30s, two younger girls, both under 10, one closer to 7 and one closer to 5, and a maybe 12-ish month-old baby. I was initially put back because I'd asked for no children under 3. However, I figured wrongly that it would be fine. I got there in the beginning of July, and immediately they pocketed my food and utilities money that I had to pay. And then they wouldn't let me use the AC and wouldn't make me food. These things are expected because I had to pay a large estimated fee. I also had to care for the baby, and would have to look after the drunk father frequently. It was a bad situation, which led to the climactic point. Later in the month, my class had taken a trip to Fuji. While in that area, I had made a purchase of some very expensive omiyage candies, which I intended to give to my family in the US the following week when I got home. They had been wrapped, bagged, and then set aside in a drawer containing a couple of other important items I had. When I went to school that following Monday, the mother was apparently cleaning in that room, had found the bag, everyone knows omiyage when they see it, opened it up, and fed it to the baby and the two children. She also went through a file where I keep some documents and emergency stuff, and had taken about $100 worth of cash. When I got home, the drawer was open, the documents were opened and strewn everywhere, and this expensive candy was thrown on the floor, opened, crushed, and eaten. I immediately confronted the family, only for EM to say that it was rude I had gotten something for my family in the US and not for them when I was in Fuji, and had decided that that was a gift for the children, since I could have gotten that at least. I reminded her that as part of the homestay expense cost, I was expected to purchase gifts back in America based off of things they said they'd liked, and had brought several gifts for the children. I'd also had a couple of additional English children's books shipped by my parents during July to give to the children, as per the EM's request. She claimed it was different because I'd gone on a separate trip and other past homestays had brought her things back. Now, yes, it is customary in Japan to go somewhere and bring back presents, but here's the thing. First off, that's usually, in my experience, specifically for coworkers, not so much for homestays and family. Also, they'd pocketed my utilities and food fees at this point, had me look after their children without even asking first, leaving me alone at home with the baby, and had received a lot of money's worth of gifts from overseas. I had purchased one thing for my family back in the US. I didn't tell them where it was. And although it was expensive, it definitely didn't cost the additional $100 she'd taken. She basically said that I should have thought about her kids while I was out, at the very least, and that it was basically an inconvenience for me to be there in the first place, which is what the cash was for. Unfortunately, legal protections for foreigners in Japan are limited, and I didn't have enough of the legal upper hand in that situation to do anything. So, yeah, I had to let it go, despite it literally being theft. I did report them to my school, but the breaking point was also that last week, and they were horrified. I believe we did eventually get some money back because the EP was dumb enough to openly admit what she did. She was proud of it. But yeah, I still think about that like 6 years later, and I'm like, damn. I awkwardly ran into EF and EM once I moved to Tokyo while at a Costco sorta near where they lived. They were surprised that I'd moved to Tokyo and had asked me to come over, citing that I should have told them so I could see their children, and that the children would love to practice their English. I held my ground, gave a really firm and admittedly rude no, and walked away. You know, in my head, I feel like I'm mentally preparing for a lot of these misunderstandings to just kind of be cultural divides, but this just sounds straight up rude. I'm glad you held your ground. Moving along, our next story is titled, Pediatric Nurse vs. EM. Take care of my 6-month-old baby during your shift while I disappear. This one is pretty old, from around 2018, but I thought about sharing it with you guys. I'm sorry if it's long and if there's any misunderstandings, since this didn't happen in the USA or UK and I'm not a native speaker. Also, mobile. My father works as a doctor, a GP with a pediatrician license, and while most of his patients are quite nice and kind, he sometimes gets interesting mothers, to put it mildly. This happened during the monthly checkups of the infants. By my country's standards, each baby has to be weighed, measured, etc. every month or 3 months so as to check on its progress. My dad, D, worked with a young nurse, N, at the time, who would help him with the checkups. He'd give the vaccine if one was needed, then send the baby with the mother and the nurse in another room to be measured. They would then return and he would check the progress and give instructions if needed. Simple procedure. Parents got used to it pretty quickly. Some proved to be problematic though. Around the middle of a busy working day, EM comes with her 6-month-old little girl for a checkup. All is good. The woman is not acting entitled or anything. Patiently, if a bit absent-mindedly, listening to my father explain about the checkup. Then she goes with the nurse to have the baby measured. Now, the procedure when measuring is for the parent to hold the child while the nurse uses tape measures to get their head, chest circumference, etc., so as not to stress them out too much. They cry a lot when a stranger in white scrubs handles them. So, she makes the parents actively participate in the process, and they're usually happy to get this over with quicker. Not EM, though. The moment they set foot in the consultations room, where the scales and everything else needed is, EM thrusts her daughter, who instantly begins squirming and crying, into the nurse's hands, and promptly gets her smartphone out. "Here, you're going to do it quick, aren't you?" She then tries to walk out of the room. "Oh, yes, ma'am, but wouldn't you like to hold her? That way she'll be much less stressed. It'll be a lot quicker, too." "But it's your job to do this, right? What do I have to do with anything that goes on here? You surely know how to handle a baby." "Of course, you're right. I'm simply asking you for a bit of assistance for the baby's sake. Also, I've only been in the field for a few years, and I'd like you to be present to ensure she's handled the way you want her to be." "Oh, really? I assume you're competent enough to get such a simple thing as measurements done by yourself. You've had training, you must know how to handle infants. Anyway, I'll be waiting outside." And just like that, ladies and gents, the mom struts her butt out of the consultation room and into the waiting area, leaving a baffled nurse with the wailing baby. Anyway, somehow the whole measuring process is complete. The infant is a little calmer now, but still sobbing, and the nurse goes out to call the EM over to the doctor's office. Slight hitch in the plan though, EM is not there. The nurse returns to the doctor's office, baby in tow, figuring that the mom would be waiting there, if not in front of the door. And where my dad confusedly asks her what the heck she's doing, carrying around an infant, and where the mom is. No idea, she just went MIA. My dad is about to lose it. It's a really busy day. There's around 6 more kids waiting outside for their turn. The cacophony of bawling, cooing, and women talking is disastrous, and now they have to look for some irresponsible woman who just up and left her kid behind. The nurse is about to burst into anxiety tears as she searches the waiting room once more for EM, goes back to the consultation room, scans the whole hallway to see if EM maybe got the office doors wrong, and is waiting at the wrong place. Nope, still MIA. This went on for I don't know how long, probably a couple of minutes, when the nurse made an awesome but terrified guess that EM might be outside at the hospital entrance. Luckily, the entrance is 2 minutes from the doctor's office, so she didn't have to haul an upset and scared infant through half the hospital. Sure enough, there EM was, talking on the phone and pacing up and down, obviously irritated. When she saw the nurse with her baby in her hands, she proceeded to hang up and looked at her like she was angry about something. "Well, that took you a while." "It took a while, ma'am, because half the time was spent looking for you. Please, take your child and come with me to the doctor's office. You can't leave the building before your appointment is done, and you can't just leave your child unattended." "What I do with my time is none of your business. I had a call to take. You wouldn't imagine I could talk calmly with all this noise inside, would you?" Nurse resisted the urge to yell. EM took her kid and followed her back inside. My dad was ballistic when she returned to his office. EM was holding up the entire queue of mothers and fathers, all asking what's wrong and how long they have to wait for. And, "You don't even have anyone else inside the office, Doc." So EM got a huge earful and a threat that they would call CPS, to which she quickly changed her tune and apologized profusely, admitting that she had wandered off, but only because she had something very urgent to discuss. Hint, from what the nurse had heard outside, the call was not that urgent, but then again, that's unproven. No CPS was called, no tantrums were had, but there sure was a lot of pressure, angry people, and wailing infants, and one very upset nurse. What bothers me with this story is that the woman wasn't a bad mom. My dad knows her to be a totally normal woman who was, up until that time, invested in her kid, even if she was a little shallow. The father was also not an ED. He can't explain to himself how or why this happened. Also, when later checkups were due, EM always now came together with the baby's dad. My father says that he handled the kid while the mom stood outside, and no second incidents happened. I'm willing to bet that, as is usual with these stories, the father probably heard and was more than a little apologetic. Anyways, with that story out of the way, we are all out of time for today's episode, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank all of you so much for tuning into Life Stories once again. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Reddit content coming your way. My name is Trent, and I hope to see you guys soon.